Hi, this is Uncle Matt's D&D Studio. I'm Matt Finch, and I'd like to remind you before we start, if you're interested in D&D videos or interested in the old school Renaissance, please hit the subscribe button so that you'll get more notifications about the videos when they get released. The topic that we're going to talk about today, an unfortunate one, is the level of tension that's arisen in the old school Renaissance's G+ community. If you're not familiar with that, the G+ community is pretty much the heartland of a lot of the DIY content and ideas and resources that are produced. You've got the creatives talking to the creatives. You've got gamers coming in and taking the maps and the monsters and so forth that are being put out there by people. And unfortunately, over the last couple of weeks, there have been a couple of real tectonic events in that community. You've got personal and also political disagreements that have led to some people actually walking away and saying "fuck it," and that's causing many of the people who are longtime members of that community to either feel nervous about being attacked themselves or just to be frustrated by the fact that they're having to see all of this stuff. And so I guess the first point that I want to make is that this is not these sources of disagreement are external to the hobby. There's something that every gaming or hobby site or community is having to deal with at this point in time. Political tensions are high, and there's no way of getting around them, and they're not going to go away anytime soon. So the issue is, how do we structure our hobby and our places in such a way that takes into account that this is all going on, but doesn't cause damage or irreparable damage to the community? Obviously, there's going to be some damage. From the standpoint of the hobby, the problem is not so much the political disagreement, it's the division between people who want to do the political disagreement in the hobby space and the people who don't want to see political disagreement in the hobby space because they do it elsewhere and they want to see that kept out of the area where they relax and escape, and we are an escapist hobby in the first place. So that is the division that we have to be looking at, is these two groups of people. Both of those two views, incidentally, are valid, which is one of the reasons that there is a lot of difficulty in terms of resolving that issue. G+ is structured in such a way that it's to the advantage of the people who want to have the freewheeling discussions everywhere, because G+ doesn't have any sort of moderation, administration hierarchy. It's all pretty much peer-to-peer in terms of how people are interacting with each other. So I'm assuming that most of the people who are listening to this video are the group that wants to figure out how to create a certain hobby preserve atmosphere on G+, or at least spaces that do that. And so that's really what I'm addressing myself toward. Now, the first tactic to take in terms of establishing this sort of hobby preserve is to begin with the space that you actually control, and to have a strong understanding of the fact that nobody has the right to use your location in particular as a soapbox for their discussion if what you want to do is retain your space as more of a preserve for just talking about the hobby specifically. And controlling your own space may seem like it's a small issue because it doesn't for the most part, what is upsetting you is probably seeing these things out there, seeing them happening to your friends, and so on and so forth. But bear with me for just a second. As long as you accept the fact, or embrace the fact, that if someone is coming onto your site and bringing in external personal disagreements with people or external political issues when you don't want to have them on there, you're perfectly within your right, to delete something like that, or tell the person, hey, I'm going to delete this, or can you rephrase it, or I'm going to delete it, or however you decide that you want to approach it. That's your space. And once you've got that sort of fixed, granted, it's not going to affect things in the outside regions of G+, except for the fact that if other people are also doing the same thing, that collective action is going to begin establishing a sort of a real estate that is a hobby preserve. No one is ever going to achieve a uniform code of conduct for the OSR on G+ in general, because, like I said, these two groups, people who want to talk freely about outside things in the gaming area, and the group of people who want to keep that out of their gaming area, those are both valid approaches to the hobby. So it's not really an issue about conduct in general. It's about conduct in particular locations. It's about dividing out some places that have one or the other approach. And so by establishing your own space as one of those, and then such other people as maybe establishing their spaces where it's kept out, you're going to have a de facto creation of a kind of a preserve. There is no way ever that people will achieve a uniform code of conduct that is enforced upon other people. You can enforce something on yourself, but not on other people. So with that understanding that there can't be a code of conduct across the board and that the real issue is about the real estate, there are still certain behaviors that you can refrain from in order to help other people who want to create a strong OSR preserve. So the first of those is this. If you see one of your friends being attacked out there, in Google Plus in general, don't go on the attack on their behalf unless they ask you to. The best way to support somebody is to send them a private message or some sort of communication about, hey, you're my friend, I support you in what's going on, and that alone does a great deal to make somebody feel like they are not isolated. And then if they come back and tell you, hey, could you say something in public, then you're onto that track about how to help your friend out. But realize that if you just happen to spot something on G+ where you feel like they're being attacked and you instantly go nuclear, what you're actually doing is taking control of the situation out of their hands and grabbing it for yourself. And that may not be something that they want to have happen. I mean, they may be trying to avoid having something spiral out of control, and then the interfering friend who comes in and does it on their behalf is actually putting them in a situation that's not one that they want to be in. So don't go on the offensive on a friend's behalf unless they ask you to. Check in with them with a private message that expresses, your support and your friendship, and you are probably, just by doing that, going a long way to make that person's life easier. Now, those two tactics, the one of keeping your own space policed against the sort of comments that you don't want to hear in the community at large, and not escalating things by interacting on behalf of one of your own friends without actually being asked to. Those two tactics are both tactics for bystanders. If you are the person who's actually under attack, there is probably a different set of responses, but that is such a more complicated area of net jujitsu in general that I'm not going to go into that aspect of things. The goal here with this video is simply to say to people, look, you're generally a bystander to this sort of thing. You don't want to see this sort of thing. How is it that you create an area in which disputes from outside the hobby are not brought into the hobby discussion? Just as one of the general audience, one of the general bystanders involved in this stuff, this is how you can push things in a way that will get you that kind of preserve created, and especially if you are talking back and forth with some people about doing it. In terms of actually protecting yourself, that's one I'm going to punt on. There are probably people who can answer that better than I can, and it has a bit less to do with the creation of the community. Because under those circumstances, each dispute is different. What I'm trying to do here is a general discussion about what G plus is, what it isn't, the fact that both of those two approaches, the wide-ranging one and the protected hobby, are both valid, and that it's the job of people who want to create a protected area on G+, given the fact that G+ is not terribly well designed for it. Those would be the first steps toward people establishing a community that works a little bit better for them, and probably you end up with a somewhat divided community between these are the free-ranging outside discussion areas of the OSR, and these are the areas where we're going to stick closely to the hobby, and it's going to be enforced individually by each person who holds that real estate, saying to people, no, get off my lawn, basically, something that we talk about an awful lot. So especially in this context, whatever sort of D&D that it is that you play, imagine the hell out of it.